Marcus Rodriguez had spent 3 years perfecting the art of hiding. Long sleeves in summer, careful positioning of his arms, strategic angles in photos, anything to keep the jagged scars running from his wrists to his elbows hidden from view. At 24, he'd built a successful career as a software engineer, earned his own apartment, and maintained a steady relationship with his girlfriend Emma. But family gatherings remained his personal hell, and tonight's celebration for his sister's engagement would prove why. The suburban house buzzed with relatives, family friends, and his sister Bethany's future in-laws. Marcus arrived fashionably late, hopping to blend into the crowd, but his mother Patricia immediately zeroed in on him. She wore that familiar expression, the one that said she was already calculating what might embarrass her this evening. "Marcus, sweetie, you look so pale," she announced loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "And why are you wearing that thick sweater? It's nearly 80 degrees outside." Before he could respond, his father Robert joined the conversation, drink in hand. "He's always been dramatic about his appearance," Robert chuckled to Patricia's sister, "ever since that whole incident in college." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. The incident had been his suicide attempt 3 years ago, a dark period triggered by severe depression, academic pressure, and undiagnosed anxiety that had consumed him completely. The scars weren't just marks on his skin. They were reminders of the lowest point in his life, when death had seemed like the only escape from the overwhelming pain. "Dad, please," Marcus said quietly, but Robert was already warming up to his audience. "Cost us a fortune in therapy bills," Robert continued, seemingly oblivious to his son's discomfort. "All that drama over some college stress. Kids these days don't know how to handle real problems." Patricia nodded in agreement, then turned to Marcus with that practiced smile she reserved for public correction. "Honey, maybe you could change into something more appropriate. I have some of your old clothes upstairs. Something that shows you're not hiding anything anymore." The suggestion hit like a physical blow. Marcus had never explicitly told his parents about the scars. They'd seen them briefly during hospital visits, but had never discussed them directly. Their willful ignorance had been almost worse than outright acknowledgement. "I'm fine in this," Marcus replied, his voice barely steady. Bethany appeared at his elbow, resplendent in her engagement dress and riding high on the evening's attention. At 26, she'd always been the golden child, successful, beautiful, and blessed with their parents' unwavering approval. "Marcus, you're making everyone uncomfortable," she hissed under her breath. "This is my night. Can't you just act normal for once?" "I am acting normal," he said. "No, you're not. You're being weird and antisocial, standing in the corner like some creep. And that sweater," she gestured dismissively at his clothing, It's like you're trying to make some kind of statement. Marcus looked around the room, realizing that several conversations had paused as family members watched their exchange. His chest began to tighten with familiar anxiety. The evening stretched ahead of him like an endurance test. He'd survived worse than this. He'd survived wanting to die. Surely he could survive one family party. But as more relatives began offering their opinions on his appearance and demeanor, Marcus wondered if some battles were worth fighting at all. Emma squeezed his hand supportively, but even her presence couldn't fully shield him from the growing storm. The Rodriguez family had always prided themselves on maintaining appearances. Their home in the affluent neighborhood of Westfield represented decades of careful social climbing, and every gathering was an opportunity to display their success to friends and extended family. Marcus had never quite fit the mold they'd envisioned for their son, and tonight that fact seemed more glaring than ever. "You remember Marcus," Patricia was saying to the Hendersons, longtime family friends. "He works with computers now, very successful but still struggles with some personal issues." The phrase "personal issues" landed like a slap. Marcus excused himself to the kitchen, needing a moment to breathe, but found no respite there either. His cousin Derek, 2 years younger and fresh from his MBA program, cornered him immediately. "Dude, what's with the sweater situation?" Derek asked, popping a beer. "Mom said you've been dressing weird lately. Everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Marcus repeated, the words becoming a mantra. "Because if you need to talk to someone, my company has excellent mental health benefits. I could get you a referral to someone who specializes in workplace stress." The assumption that his struggles were merely professional irritated Marcus, but he nodded politely. Derek meant well, but like most of the family, he reduced complex mental health issues to simple stress management problems. Back in the living room, the party continued its relentless march. Bethany's fiancé James was regaling guests with stories from his law firm, while Bethany basked in the attention and admiration. They were the perfect couple, attractive, successful, uncomplicated by the messy realities that plagued people like Marcus. "Marcus, come here," Patricia called out. "I want you to meet Captain Harrison. He's retired military, such a fascinating man." Marcus reluctantly approached the group where his mother stood with an imposing figure in his 50s. Captain William Harrison carried himself with unmistakable military bearing, straight posture, alert eyes, and an aura of quiet authority that commanded respect without demanding it. "Captain Harrison, this is my son Marcus," Patricia said, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when trying to manage family impressions. "He's been going through a bit of a phase lately." The word phase stung worse than the previous attempts at public correction. Marcus extended his hand for a polite greeting, but something in Captain Harrison's expression had shifted. The older man's eyes had moved to Marcus's sleeve, where the fabric had ridden up slightly during the handshake, revealing just a glimpse of scarred skin. Recognition flickered across the captain's weathered features, not curiosity or pity, but understanding. "Son," Captain Harrison said quietly, his grip firm and steady, "it's good to meet you." The simple acknowledgement, free of judgment or qualification, nearly undid Marcus completely. Here was someone who saw without explaining away, who recognized without diminishing. "Marcus has been having some confidence issues," Patricia continued, apparently oblivious to the exchange between the two men. "We keep telling him he needs to put himself out there more, stop hiding behind those long sleeves and heavy clothes." Captain Harrison's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his eyes never left Marcus's face. "Sometimes," the captain said carefully, "people have their reasons for the choices they make." Patricia laughed, a sound that somehow managed to be both dismissive and condescending. "Oh, he's just being dramatic. You know how young people are these days. They make everything into such a production." The familiar shame began its crawl up Marcus's spine, but something in Captain Harrison's steady presence held it at bay. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken understanding, while the party continued its oblivious celebration around them. Robert joined the group, carrying his third drink of the evening and wearing the jovial expression that usually preceded his most embarrassing commentary. "Captain, you've got to excuse my son. He's been going through what his therapist calls a difficult adjustment period." Robert made air quotes around the phrase, grinning as if sharing an inside joke. 3 years," Patricia added helpfully. 3 years of this behavior. We've tried everything, therapy, medication, even family counseling. Nothing seems to work." Marcus felt heat creep up his neck as more family members began gravitating toward their conversation. His Aunt Linda approached with her husband Tom, both wearing expressions of concerned curiosity. "What behavior are we talking about?" Linda asked, clearly ready for gossip. "Oh, you know," Patricia waved dismissively. "The antisocial stuff, the weird clothes, all the drama from college. He went through this whole melodramatic episode his junior year, ended up in the hospital for a few days." The casual way she reduced his suicide attempt to melodramatic episode hit Marcus like a physical blow. He could feel Captain Harrison's attention sharpen, though the older man's expression remained carefully neutral. "Sometimes young people face challenges that require understanding rather than judgment," Captain Harrison said, his voice carrying a weight that made several family members pause their conversations. Of course," Robert nodded sagely. "But at some point you have to move on. Can't live in the past forever, right? We've been patient, but honestly, it's been affecting the whole family. Bethany materialized beside them, having caught wind of the conversation. "This is exactly what I was talking about," she said, shooting Marcus a pointed look. "Everything always has to revolve around his issues. It's exhausting." "Bethany," Emma warned quietly, appearing at Marcus's other side. "No, Emma, it's true. Do you know how many family events have been ruined because everyone has to walk on eggshells around Marcus? How many conversations we can't have because he might get triggered?" The word "triggered" came out with obvious disdain, and Marcus saw Captain Harrison's expression harden slightly. "And look at him tonight," Bethany continued, warming to her theme. "Dressed like it's winter, standing in corners, making everyone uncomfortable. It's my engagement party, for God's sake. The least he could do is try to act normal." "Maybe normal means different things to different people," Captain Harrison suggested quietly. "Exactly." Patricia seized on what she perceived as support. "That's what we keep telling him. He needs to learn what normal looks like. Stop hiding behind those ridiculous long sleeves and just face reality." The room had grown quieter as more guests tuned into the increasingly tense conversation. Marcus could feel dozens of eyes on him, waiting for his response, expecting him to either defend himself or retreat in shame. "The sleeves aren't the problem," Marcus said finally, his voice steadier than he felt. "Then what is?" Robert challenged. "Because from where we sit, you've been using this whole college thing as an excuse to avoid dealing with real life." The casual dismissal of his lowest moment, the reduction of genuine mental health struggles to excuse-making, finally pushed Marcus past his breaking point. "Fine," he said, reaching for his sleeves. "You want to see reality. Let's look at reality." Emma caught his wrist gently. "Marcus, you don't have to." "No," he said, looking around the room at his family's expectant faces. "They want normal. They want me to stop hiding. Let's see how they handle it." Captain Harrison stepped closer, positioning himself slightly between Marcus and the rest of the family. The gesture was subtle but unmistakable, protection offered by someone who understood. The room held its breath as Marcus made his decision. Marcus pushed up his sleeve slowly, deliberately, revealing the network of scars that crisscrossed his forearms. The room fell into complete silence as the raised, jagged lines caught the light, some thin and precise, others deeper and more desperate, all telling the story of a night 3 years ago when the pain had become unbearable. The silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then Patricia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in theatrical horror. "Marcus," she hissed, "what are you doing? Put those away." "Away where, Mom?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying a calmness that surprised even him. You wanted me to stop hiding. You said I needed to face reality. Robert's face had gone pale, then flushed red with embarrassment. "This is not appropriate," he said through gritted teeth. "Not here, not tonight." "When would it be appropriate, Dad? When would be the right time to acknowledge what actually happened to me?" Bethany looked mortified, her eyes darting between Marcus's scars and her guests. "You're ruining everything," she whispered furiously. "People are starring." "Let them stare," Marcus replied. "You all wanted normal conversation. This is the most honest conversation we've had in 3 years." Several guests had indeed begun starring, their expressions ranging from shock to uncomfortable pity. Marcus watched his family's carefully constructed social facade crumble in real time. But Captain Harrison stepped forward, his movement commanding attention. When he spoke, his voice carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to being heard and obeyed. "I served 3 tours in Afghanistan," he said, addressing the room but keeping his eyes on Marcus. "Lost good soldiers, sons and daughters, really, to an enemy most people never understood. When I came home, I thought the hardest battles were behind me." The room was completely still now, even the ambient party noise seeming to fade. "But some of the hardest battles," Harrison continued, "are the ones fought in silence, in darkness, against enemies that live inside your own mind. And the scars from those battles," he paused, looking directly at Patricia and Robert, "deserve respect, not shame." Patricia opened her mouth to speak, but Harrison held up a hand. "I've seen soldiers hide their wounds out of pride, out of fear, out of the misguided belief that healing means forgetting. And I've watched good people die because they were more afraid of judgment than they were of death itself." He turned to face Marcus fully. "Son, those scars tell a story of survival. They're proof that you fought a battle most people never have to face, and you won. The fact that you're standing here tonight, 3 years later, building a life and maintaining relationships, that's not weakness. That's strength most people can't comprehend." Emma squeezed Marcus's hand, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "But Captain," Patricia began weakly, "surely you understand our position. We're trying to help him move forward, not dwell on." "Ma'am," Harrison interrupted, his tone respectful but firm, "with all due respect, what I see here tonight is a young man who survived something that kills 45,000 Americans every year. What I don't see is a family that understands the magnitude of that survival." The numbers hit the room like a physical force. 45,000. The abstract concept of suicide suddenly became terrifyingly concrete. Robert shifted uncomfortably. "We've been supportive. We paid for therapy. You've been managing," Harrison corrected. "There's a difference between support and management. Support means honoring someone's journey. Management means trying to make their reality more comfortable for you. The distinction landed with devastating accuracy, and Marcus saw recognition flicker across several family members' faces. Now, Harrison continued, I don't know all the details of what this young man went through, and I don't need to. What I know is that he's here, he's functioning, he's building a life. And if wearing long sleeves helps him feel secure while he continues that process, then that's exactly what he should do. He looked around the room, making eye contact with each family member. Because healing isn't about making other people comfortable with your survival. It's about learning to live with yourself. The weight of Harrison's words settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Marcus felt something shift inside him, not healing exactly, but recognition. For the first time in 3 years, someone had seen his struggle and named it accurately. I think, Harrison said quietly, it's time for people to start treating this young man with the respect he's earned. The party resumed gradually, but the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. Small groups of relatives approached Marcus tentatively, their earlier curiosity replaced by something approaching understanding. His Aunt Linda hugged him carefully, whispering an apology he hadn't expected. His Uncle Tom shook his hand solemnly, mentioning his own father's struggles with depression. But the most significant change was in his immediate family's behavior. Patricia and Robert had retreated to the kitchen, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. Bethany stood by the window with James, her earlier anger replaced by what looked like genuine confusion. Captain Harrison found Marcus on the back patio, where he'd stepped outside to process everything that had just happened. "You okay, son?" Harrison asked, settling into a nearby chair. "I'm not sure," Marcus admitted. "I've been hiding this for so long, I forgot what it felt like to have someone actually understand." "Understanding is rare," Harrison agreed. "Most people want to fix things they can't comprehend, or ignore things that make them uncomfortable. Your family means well, but they've been treating your survival like a problem to be solved rather than a victory to be celebrated." Marcus looked down at his forearms, still visible in the patio light. "It doesn't feel like victory most days." "Victory rarely does," Harrison said. "Real victory is quiet, personal. It's getting up each morning when part of you doesn't want to. It's building relationships when trust feels impossible. It's choosing life over and over again, even when that choice is hard." They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, the sounds of the party drifting through the open doors. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said finally. "Ashud, how did you know? When you saw the scars, you didn't look surprised or horrified. You looked like you recognized something." Harrison was quiet for a long moment. "Because I did recognize something. Lost my youngest brother to suicide when he was 22. Marine, 2 tour in Iraq, came home and couldn't figure out how to live with what he'd seen and done. Marcus felt his chest tighten with sympathy. Tommy hid his struggles from everyone, including me. Thought he was protecting us, thought he was being strong. The night he died, he called me, but I was at a dinner party, probably not unlike this one, and I let it go to voicemail. The pain in Harrison's voice was evident despite his controlled delivery. I've spent 15 years wondering what might have happened if someone had simply acknowledged his struggle instead of trying to manage it away. If someone had told him that his scars, the invisible ones, were proof of battles fought, not character flaws to be hidden. Understanding passed between them, the recognition of shared experience with different outcomes. Your family, Harrison continued, they're scared. They almost lost you once, and they're terrified it might happen again. But their fear is making them treat you like you're still in crisis, instead of recognizing that you're in recovery. Emma appeared in the doorway. Marcus, your mom wants to talk to you. Marcus looked at Harrison, who nodded encouragingly. Remember, the older man said quietly, you survived the hardest part. This is just cleanup. In the kitchen, Patricia and Robert stood awkwardly by the counter. Patricia's earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by something that looked like genuine distress. Sweetheart, she began hesitantly, we need to talk about what just happened. Do we? Marcus asked, not unkindly but with a wariness born of 3 years of similar conversations that had led nowhere productive. That man, Robert said, gesturing vaguely toward the living room, he made some valid points about how we've been handling things. Patricia nodded reluctantly. We thought we were helping. We thought if we could just get you to move past it, to stop dwelling on what happened. You thought if I looked normal, I'd be normal, Marcus finished. Yes, she admitted quietly, and maybe that was wrong. The admission hung in the air between them. It wasn't a complete understanding, but it was a beginning. Mom, Dad, Marcus said carefully, what happened to me 3 years ago wasn't something I chose. It was something that happened because I was sick in a way that almost killed me. And the scars aren't reminders of failure. They're reminders of survival. Robert cleared his throat. The captain said 45,000 people a year die by suicide, Marcus completed. I almost became one of those statistics. The fact that I didn't isn't something to be ashamed of or hidden away. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. We were so scared, she whispered. When the hospital called when we saw you in that bed, we didn't know how to handle it. So you decided not to handle it at all, Marcus said, but without accusation. You decided it was easier to pretend it never happened and focus on getting me to appear normal. We didn't know what else to do, Robert said helplessly. Emma stepped closer to Marcus, her presence a steady comfort. Maybe it's time to learn, she suggested gently. The conversation continued for another hour, tentative and sometimes painful, but more honest than any they'd had since his hospitalization. No miraculous transformations occurred. Years of established patterns don't change in a single evening, but something fundamental had shifted. When Bethany finally approached Marcus near the end of the party, her earlier anger had transformed into something more complex. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "What I said earlier about acting normal and covering up, that was cruel." Marcus studied his sister's face, looking for sincerity. "You were protecting your night." "I was being selfish," she corrected, "and ignorant. I never really understood what happened to you in college. I knew you were in the hospital, but Mom and Dad made it sound like stress or exhaustion or something manageable." "It wasn't manageable," Marcus said simply. "That was the point." "I'm beginning to understand that." She hesitated. "Can I ask, are you okay now, really okay?" It was the first time anyone in his family had asked that question directly, without qualifiers or assumptions. "I'm better," Marcus said honestly. "Not cured, not fixed, but better. Most days are good days now. Some days are still hard, but I have tools to deal with the hard days." Bethany nodded, processing this information. "And the sleeves, the covering up, is about feeling safe," Marcus explained. "The scars are visible reminders of the worst period of my life. Some days I'm fine with people seeing them. Other days, I need them covered because the stares and questions are too much to handle." "Like a security blanket." "Like armor," Marcus corrected. "Protection while I continue healing." As the evening wound down and guests began departing, Captain Harrison found Marcus one final time. "You did good tonight, son," he said, shaking Marcus's hand firmly. "Takes courage to stand in your truth." "Thank you," Marcus said, "for everything you said, for understanding." "For seeing you," Harrison completed. "That's what everyone deserves, to be seen for who they are, not who others think they should be." Harrison handed Marcus a business card. "I run a support group for veterans and first responders dealing with PTSD and related issues. We meet twice a month. You're not military, but trauma is trauma, and healing is healing. You might find some value in talking to others who understand." Marcus accepted the card gratefully. "I might take you up on that." "Doors always open," Harrison said. "And Marcus, those scars of yours, in my world we call those battle ribbons. Wear them with pride." As Harrison walked away, Marcus looked down at his forearms, still visible in his pushed-up sleeves. For the first time in 3 years, he didn't immediately cover them. Emma slipped her arm through his. "Ready to go home?" Yeah, Marcus said, meaning it in more ways than one. I'm ready. The drive home was quiet, both Marcus and Emma processing the evening's events. The familiar streets of their neighborhood looked different somehow, not changed, but seen through new eyes. Marcus realized that something fundamental had shifted inside him, though he couldn't yet name what it was. That was intense, Emma said finally as they pulled into their apartment complex. That's one word for it, Marcus replied, still feeling slightly surreal about everything that had transpired. In their apartment, they settled onto the couch with cups of tea, the comfortable routine helping to ground them after the emotional whirlwind of the party. "Can I ask you something?" Emma said, curling up beside him. "Always." "How do you feel about what happened tonight? Really feel, not just the surface stuff." Marcus considered the question carefully, terrified and relieved at the same time. For 3 years, I've been carrying this secret shame about my scars, about what they represent. My family's reaction just reinforced that shame, made me feel like my survival was somehow embarrassing or inconvenient. He traced a finger along one of the more prominent scars on his left forearm. But tonight, Captain Harrison looked at these and saw something completely different. He saw evidence of a battle fought and won, not proof of weakness or failure. "That's how I've always seen them," Emma said softly. "I was just waiting for you to see them that way too." Marcus looked at her with renewed appreciation. "You never asked me to cover them up." "Never even occurred to me," she said honestly. "They're part of your story. Why would I want you to hide your story?" The simplicity of her acceptance struck him deeply. Emma had never treated his scars as problems to be solved or embarrassments to be managed. She'd simply accepted them as part of who he was. "I think I want to try something," Marcus said suddenly. "What's that?" "I want to try going to work tomorrow without long sleeves." Emma sat up slightly, studying his face. "Are you sure? That's a big step." "I'm terrified," he admitted. But Captain Harrison was right. I've been treating my survival like something shameful instead of something remarkable. Maybe it's time to stop hiding from my own story." Emma kissed his cheek gently. "I'm proud of you. Tonight was brave, and tomorrow will be brave too." They talked until nearly midnight, processing not just the evening's events but years of accumulated pain and progress. Marcus found himself sharing details about his recovery that he'd never voiced before. The small daily victories, the setbacks, the gradual reconstruction of his sense of self-worth. "You know what the strangest part is?" he said as they were getting ready for bed. "What's that?" "I spent 3 years thinking my family would reject me if they really knew what happened. But tonight, when they finally saw the full truth, the ones who had the strongest reaction were the ones who'd been rejecting me all along." Emma paused in brushing her teeth. What do you mean? My parents and Bethany. They were horrified when I showed my scars, but not because of what the scars meant. They were horrified because it forced them to confront their own behavior. Captain Harrison saw the same scars and immediately understood their significance. The distinction was important, Marcus realized. The scars themselves weren't the problem. The problem was his family's inability to accept what the scars represented. People see what they're prepared to see, Emma said thoughtfully. Your family wasn't prepared to see survival. They were only prepared to see problems. Marcus nodded, feeling pieces of understanding click into place. And Captain Harrison was prepared to see survival because he understood what survival looks like. Sleep came easier that night than it had in months. For the first time since his hospitalization, Marcus fell asleep without checking to ensure his sleeves covered his scars completely. The next morning brought its own challenges. Standing in front of his closet, Marcus stared at the short-sleeved shirts he'd relegated to weekend wear around the apartment. His hand hovered over a simple blue polo shirt, professional but casual, appropriate for his software development job. Second thoughts, Emma asked from the doorway. Third and fourth thoughts, Marcus admitted, but I'm going to do it anyway. The shirt felt strange after years of long sleeves, his scars clearly visible from wrist to elbow. In the bathroom mirror, he looked like a different person, more vulnerable, but also more honest. Emma appeared behind him in the reflection. You look like yourself, she said simply. The observation was more profound than it seemed. For 3 years, Marcus had been presenting a carefully curated version of himself to the world, hiding the parts of his story that seemed too raw or difficult for others to handle. This version, scars visible, truth apparent, felt simultaneously terrifying and liberating. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. Honey, can we talk today, when you have time? The message was notably different from her usual communications, less directive, more tentative. The events of the previous evening had clearly affected her as much as they'd affected him. Work first, he told Emma, then I'll deal with family. The 20-minute commute to his office felt like preparation for battle. Marcus found himself mentally rehearsing explanations, anticipating questions, preparing for the inevitable stares and comments. But as he walked through the parking garage and into the building, something unexpected happened. Nothing. His coworkers greeted him normally, asked about his weekend, discussed the Monday morning project priorities. If anyone noticed his scars, they didn't comment. The world didn't end. His colleagues didn't suddenly treat him differently or shower him with unwanted pity. By lunchtime, Marcus realized he'd been holding his breath for 4 hours, waiting for a catastrophe that hadn't materialized. "Hey, Marcus," called Jenny from accounting as he heated his lunch in the break room. "How was your sister's engagement party?" "Interesting," Marcus replied, then found himself adding, "Actually, it was kind of a breakthrough night for my family." Jenny smiled. "Those can be the best kind. Family stuff is never simple, is it?" The casual acceptance of his statement, the lack of probing questions or uncomfortable silence, reminded Marcus that most people were far more focused on their own lives than on analyzing his appearance for signs of hidden trauma. His phone rang as he was returning to his desk. The caller ID showed Captain Harrison's number. "Marcus, it's Bill Harrison. Hope you don't mind me calling." "Not at all, Captain. How are you?" "I'm well, son. I wanted to check on you after last night. That took considerable courage, what you did." Marcus found himself smiling. "I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. I wore short sleeves to work today for the first time in 3 years." "Outstanding," Harrison said, and Marcus could hear the genuine pride in his voice. "How did that go?" "Easier than I expected. Turns out most people are too busy with their own lives to spend much time analyzing mine." Harrison chuckled. "That's usually how it works. We build these scenarios in our heads about how others will react, but reality is often much simpler." "Captain, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Last night when you stood up for me, why, you barely knew me." Harrison was quiet for a moment. "Because I saw something I recognized. And because 30 years of military service taught me that some battles are worth fighting, even when they're not your own battles." The answer settled something in Marcus's chest that he hadn't realized was unsettled. "There's something else," Harrison continued. "I spoke to your parents this morning." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "Oh." "They called me, actually. Wanted to understand better what happened last night, what I meant by some of the things I said. We had a good conversation about trauma, about recovery, about the difference between helping and managing." "How did that go?" "Better than you might expect. They're scared, Marcus, but they're also willing to learn. Your mother asked me to recommend some resources for families dealing with suicide survival. Your father wanted to know how to be more supportive." The information was almost too much to process. His parents, who had spent 3 years avoiding any meaningful discussion of his mental health crisis, had voluntarily sought out education on the topic. "They love you, son," Harrison continued. "They just didn't know how to show it in a way that helped rather than hurt." After ending the call, Marcus sat at his desk trying to integrate this new information. The family dynamics that had felt fixed and unchangeable suddenly seemed more fluid, more open to revision. His afternoon was interrupted by another call, this one from his sister. "Marcus, it's Bethany. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Sure, he said, noting the unusual formality in her tone. I've been thinking about last night, about things I said and things I didn't understand. I called Dr. Martinez. Do you remember her? My therapist from when James and I were having relationship issues. Marcus did remember. Bethany had seen Dr. Martinez for several months during a difficult period in her engagement. I made an appointment to talk about family dynamics and trauma response. I realized last night that I don't actually understand what you went through, what you're still going through, and I want to understand. The admission was so unexpected that Marcus wasn't sure how to respond. I also want to apologize, Bethany continued. Not just for last night, but for 3 years of treating your recovery like an inconvenience. That was wrong, and I'm sorry. Thank you, Marcus said, surprised by how much the apology meant to him. Can we have lunch this week? I'd like to start over if that's okay with you. Marcus looked down at his visible scars, then around his office where he'd spent a successful day being authentically himself. I'd like that, he said. The transformation hadn't happened overnight, and Marcus knew it wouldn't be complete or permanent without continued effort from everyone involved. But for the first time in 3 years, his family seemed willing to meet him where he was. Instead of demanding, he pretended to be somewhere else. That evening, Emma came home to find Marcus preparing dinner with his sleeves rolled up, not making a statement, not hiding, just existing comfortably in his own skin. "Good day," she asked, kissing him hello. "Very good day," he replied. "I think I'm starting to understand what Captain Harrison meant about victory being quiet." As they settled into their evening routine, Marcus reflected on the changes that had begun the night before. He wasn't fixed. Healing didn't work that way. But he was visible, authentic, and surrounded by people who were learning to see his survival as strength rather than weakness. 3 weeks later, Marcus attended his first meeting of Captain Harrison's support group. The community center room was filled with men and women of various ages, all carrying their own stories of trauma and recovery. Some bore visible scars, others invisible ones, but all understood the complicated journey of learning to live with experiences that had fundamentally changed them. "Welcome," Harrison said as the meeting began. "Tonight we have a new member joining us. Marcus, would you like to introduce yourself?" Marcus looked around the circle of faces, some curious, some encouraging, all understanding. "Hi," he said, his voice steady. "I'm Marcus. 3 years ago, I almost died by suicide. Tonight is the first time I've ever said that out loud to strangers." The admission felt both terrifying and liberating. "I've spent 3 years hiding the evidence of what happened to me, convinced that my survival was somehow shameful or embarrassing. It took a family crisis and a retired Navy captain to help me understand that my scars are proof of a battle won, not lost. He paused, looking down at his forearms where the scars were clearly visible in the fluorescent light. I'm here because I'm ready to stop treating my survival like a secret and start treating it like the victory it actually is. The group welcomed him with understanding nods and genuine smiles, the recognition of one survivor by others who understood the journey.